Alright, what is good, ladies and gentlemen? It is the Master Reviewer back again with another review, and today we are doing a review for Dr. Stone's Science Future Part 2. This is half a rewatch for me, and the other half is a new watch. I watched initially the first 6 episodes around the time that it was airing, and then that was around the time that I also started this channel, and I decided then, okay, I'm not going to bother with all the continuations of shows that I have, because it's just going to end up wasting my time if I'm anyway going to eventually rewatch all the shows for the channel. And so I did end up stopping. I did not watch the last 6 episodes of this season, and so this was my first time watching the final 6 episodes, and I gotta say, I'm just gonna say it right now, this season was incredible. I loved it. I thought that yeah, well, I'll give my final score at the end, but this was just an amazing season. I really liked it the entire way through. And yeah, so before we begin, I do want to give a sub thanks. I think we hit I don't remember if I gave a sub thanks for 63 subscribers, but we did actually hit 64 subscribers. So big thank you to all the subscribers, all the commenters, all the recommenders, all the viewers, anyone that is interacting with the channel any way, shape, or form. I do greatly appreciate it. So once again, big thanks for 64 subscribers, and let us just get into it, starting off with the plot. And the plot of this season, it is picking up where the last part left off, where the Senku's crew, they captured Zeno, and so the plot is that, yeah, the Senku's crew, they are running away with Zeno to South America, while you have a truce going on in Corn City between the rest of Senku's Science Kingdom and the rest of Zeno's Science Kingdom. So you have like a truce going on there, and then Zeno is captured by Senku and the rest of the gang, and they are running to South America while Stanley is chasing them. So the first, I want to say, half of the season is pretty much a pursuit. It's a game of it's a chase, basically. It's like you have them running away from Stanley, who has the advantage because he has the speed advantage, as well as he is able to track them with the sonar, and so they come up with like a way to distract him using they send out the mobile science lab to distract Stanley. They end up also meeting, along the way, they meet Chelsea, who is this top-notch geographer, and so she helps them out throughout the season, and eventually they make it to Ecuador, where they end up making motorcycles to escape into the jungle. I don't remember what jungle it is, but they escape into a jungle, and then from there, their goal is to get to the epicenter of South America in order to find where the initial petrification started, and in doing so, they end up finding a lot of Medusas, and then from there, a lot of the rest of the season is trying to figure out how the Medusas work, and ultimately their goal is to use the Medusa in order to freeze Stanley. That is their goal for the season, and so they're kind of coordinating with the rest of the Science Kingdom back at Corn City, so they are in contact with a guy named Joel, ends up getting revived, and so he's like this expert watchmaker, and so he is in coordination. They're not exactly like coordinating with each other, but they're coordinating. It's just they're not in direct communication with each other because Stanley is tracking the comms of the Science Kingdom, and so Joel, as well as Senku and Kaseki and Chrome, they're all working in order to figure out how the Medusa works. And yeah, so Senku and the rest of the Science Kingdom, they plan, okay, we're going to set up a stone sanctuary at a certain part of South America. I don't remember what the part was, but so they end up setting up shop there, basically prepare for the final confrontation between them and Stanley. And then the rest of the season is basically they are just fighting against the clock in order to make a petrification device that will be able to stop Stanley. And so you do end up, I'll get into some major spoilers right now for anyone that is planning to watch, which I do highly recommend. So major spoilers, they end up having to, their goal is basically we need to delay as Stanley for as long as possible. So they end up sending Kohaku, Tetsukasa, and Hyoga, who all end up dying in the process of trying to slow down Stanley and his crew. So like they managed to destroy Stanley's comms, and in the process, all 3 of them just end up dying, and I was like shocked when I saw that, like, Jesus Christ, they're really going all in with this. And so they killed him, and then at that point, Stanley's like, okay, we're going, like, we lost our comms, so at this point, full-on assault, we're not doing anything, because basically they lost their hostage advantage of taking all of the people in Corn City as hostages, so they lost their hostage advantage. I can't really explain why, probably, like, I'm not able to officially explain why they lost their advantage because they're not in contact with the hostages that they had, so they're not able to use that as leverage against the Science Kingdom in order for them to give up Zeno, so they just go all in, guns a-blazing. They kill Tetsukasa, they kill Hyoga, they kill Kohaku, they manage to, then they just go into the actual stone sanctuary. Taiju, he takes a grenade to the face, so Taiju's just wiped out. Ryusui, he gets gunned down. there was an initial plan where they were going to have Suika and Francois. They were going to be the ones to initiate the Medusa. Sorry, they weren't going to be the Chrome basically comes up with an idea. It's like, hey, what if we use the Medusas and we just kind of kamikaze it, and then we petrify ourselves along with Stanley and his entire crew, and then we'll just have like some people that are really far away in order to unpetrify us. That's their initial plan. So they initially wanted to send Suika out with Francois, but they end up seeing, her name is, I forgot her name is, let me see here. I think her name is like Charlotte or something. I'm just checking here just to make sure that I'm correct. It's one of Stanley's crew members. Yeah, Charlotte. So Charlotte is, she was the one that initially, when Ryusui and Senku fought Stanley in the dogfight in the last part of the season, she was the one that was actually fighting them and not Stanley. So she ends up getting bitten by a poisonous spider. Actually, I think it would be venomous. Yeah, venomous is if it's like an animal that is killing you, then it's venomous. If it's something that you ingest, then it's poisonous. So a venomous spider ends up biting Charlotte, and so Suika and Francois, they go to her to save her life, and in the process they end up getting captured. And so you have also Ginro and Masukase, they end up getting captured earlier on in the season. So you have 4 hostages, and so instead they have Charlotte and Luna. They are the ones that are going to enact the plan of going far, far away in order for them to be able to revive everyone. But then at this point, everyone is just getting gunned down. Like I said, like there's so many casualties. Everyone is just getting absolutely killed in the process. So they're like, okay, we need a new plan. We need to figure this out. So their plan is basically, Senku's like, okay, you know what? Screw it. Guns a-blazing. We're gonna, it's kind of weird. He doesn't, like, at the time, he doesn't know about the revival. Like, another spoiler, the petrification itself, they end up finding out that it has a revival effect where not only does it heal wounds, but it can literally bring people back from the dead. So later on, Hyoga, who ends up dying, initially, like, Tetsukasa sees, like, oh, Hyoga is straight up dead. He ends up coming back to life. So Senku's, like, kind of banking on the fact that he's hoping that the effects of the unpetrification, the revival fluid, will have substantial effects. So he basically tells the people at Cord City, he's like, okay, break the truce. We're just going to go get to the working Medusa. And so they end up getting caught. The people in Cord City, they make a working Medusa, but they end up getting caught by Brody and the rest of the guards there. So they get captured, but then Senku basically says, no, go, you have to get there and get... He tells Joel, basically, because Joel has a communication watch with Senku, so he tells him, okay, get to whatever happens, make sure that you get the watch to the Medusa, basically. And so that's what happens, and so everyone there just gets massacred. You have, who's there? Magma killed Moss, killed Kirisame, killed Homaru, Homura killed Nikki, killed, who else is there? Yuzuriha killed Yo. Just, all of them are just massacred there, and so Joel is the only one left. He gets his hand slammed by Brody, like Brody slams his hand in the safe. So he's pretty much about to probably bleed out or die or at least like he's gonna pass out from the pain. But luckily he did get his hand close enough to the Medusa, so the watch is close enough, and so Senku basically petrifies the entire world, and so that is the way that they basically plan to win. And so the final plan is like, okay, they need a way in order for someone to get unpetrified initially, and so they can't really go with the strategy of throwing what they did at Treasure Island of like timing throwing the nitric acid in the air in order to, and for it to fall on Senku exactly, because I think something to do with they're not able to actually time the speed of it because it has different speeds, like depending on how far it goes. So honestly, this is the part that I think gets to me the most. I feel like it would be really easy in order to stop this. Like, you just have have Chrome, have Senku facing Chrome, with Chrome facing towards where the petrification is coming, and then have, right as it, like, I get it goes really fast, fine, it goes fast, but have Chrome just, like, continuously pouring the revival fluid over Senku's head while they're both getting petrified, and then at the time, like, okay, fine, I get it. Fine. The only way that I can imagine justify, if it was going the speed that it was in Treasure Island, they could absolutely just have like Chrome pouring the revival fluid over Senku's head as he's getting petrified. I feel like that could easily work, but they end up going with the strategy of, okay, we're going to put the revival fluid up on this like really high parch area, and then we're just going to have like someone stand underneath there. They end up getting Suika, so Suika ends up standing underneath there, and they're like, okay, eventually time will pass and the revival fluid flask will break, and then whoever's underneath will get revived, which ends up being Suika. So, but I don't know. I feel like there could have been easier ways to do it. Like, I guess if the petrification like comes in a flash, which in that case I feel like, okay, fine, that I can get why it wouldn't work. But then I'm pretty sure we even saw like Stanley, his whole face got petrified and he was still able to have time to light a cigarette. So I'm thinking like, is it really that hard to just get someone that's a bit farther away from the light and someone that's a bit closer, just have them pour the revival fluid over it? Like, that's the only thing that really, honestly, that I'll say that now, that's like my least favorite thing about the season probably. But we'll get to that after. Well, I'm not going to just rate it now. So yeah, anyway, so Suika is the only, she ends up, after like years go by, I think it was a total of 2 to 3 years went by until Suika actually ends up getting revived. And so she gets revived from the nitric acid, and then from there she is alone, so she ends up gathering all the statues, and then she initially is looking for revival fluid in order to use on Senku, but then she can't find any flasks that are left, and so she sees that Senku actually wrote the instructions of how to make the nitric acid, and so from there she needs to she is on a mission now to create the nitric acid on her own, and it takes her a while. It takes her, I think, a total of like 7, they said 7 years. I don't know if the 7 years was like in total with her trying to find, I'm assuming probably like from when she started making the nitric acid, because I'm assuming she probably spent no more than, I would say, a few months trying to look for nitric acid from the other people that were around. So yeah, so it takes Suika 7 years in order to make the revival fluid, and then she ends up making the revival fluid, and honestly, it's a beautiful moment. She ends up reviving Senku, and then it has been 7 years, so she does end up, she kind of goes through her own time skip, kind of, so she does look a lot older now than she did previously, and it's just a great moment. Like, not even just when she revives Senku, but she revives Senku, and then they revive like the rest of the gang, and it's just such a great sequence. And yeah, then everyone's back basically, and they even end up reviving. Their goal basically now is, okay, first of all, they end up finding out the whole revival effects of the petrification. They say, okay, well, we can use this apparently to bring people back from the dead, and then there's like now an ethical kind of conundrum that Chrome, Senku, Tetsukasa, and Zeno apparently know of. No one else is aware of it, really. I think Gen might be aware of it. I'm not exactly sure, and now their goal is basically their initial goal, which was to go after Y-Man on the moon. They are trying to find whoever initially started the petrification, and so that is now their goal. And they have enlisted the help of Zeno, basically saying like, hey, we can testify when we revive everyone. We can testify saying that Stanley was just following military orders, and so and he wasn't trying to just blatantly murder us and stuff. And so Zeno's like, yeah, sure, why not? He'll go along with the mission, and so now Zeno is working with Zeno. Now the whole goal next season, I'm presuming the goal is to build a rocket to get to the moon. That is the goal of the crew, and that is where the season ends. And so overall, I will give the plot. So it is kind of split between running away from Stanley and then the actual war with Stanley, as well as at the end you do have the whole Suika on her own arc. And so overall, I would give the plot, I would say, probably an 8.5. I would say that it was amazing. I very much enjoyed the plot. It was, yeah, for all the stuff I listed, I thought was great. There was no moment that I really disliked, except for just we'll get to the stuff I disliked later, not yet. In terms of the characters, yeah, at this point we have a ton of characters, and it does feel like there's a bit less time for some of the characters, specifically the ones at Corn City, because there are at this point so many characters, but even then they have stuff to do. They get their own little arc of creating diamonds, like synthetic diamonds, and then mining their own diamonds, and so I think that it is all very, very good. Like they have stuff to do, as well as then let's see the new characters. The only new characters this season are Chelsea and Joel. I like Joel a lot. I like Chelsea as well. I think that they're great additions to the cast. And yeah, overall, the next video will probably be a character ranking, so I will get my thoughts out on all the characters. But so far, everyone that has been in the show up until this point has been great, and yeah, you'll just hear more of my thoughts about the characters when we do the actual character ranking. Overall, the characters, I will say, solid, 9 out of 10, incredible, love all the characters. I do wish that certain characters had a bit more time, as usual, because at this point, the cast is huge, and so you don't get a lot of time to focus on each character in particular, but even so, each character is still incredible, I would say. So in terms of the settings, the Stone Sanctuary, that's the big one in this season. You do have, they're on the sea for the first bit of it, and then they actually make it to South America, and so you do have some jungle areas, you have some desert-like areas, kind of. You have the Stone Sanctuary area, which is the final confrontation, and overall I would say the settings are great. I would say I would give it an 8 out of 10. I do like the settings. I think that these are about in the middle. I would say that have been better settings, but here, do I like them more than part 1? I do kind of like the whole Zeno's base from part 1. That is a nice setting, as well as the forest areas, but I will definitely say that this is about as good as those settings. So definitely, yeah, great settings. I'll say 8 out of 10. In terms of the art style, the usual 8.5. I have nothing really to complain about the art style. I think that it is just about the same as normal. 8.5, amazing. It still looks great. It hasn't really changed since the very start of the show, so just an 8.5. In terms of the science aspects, I think that these science aspects are still great, wonderful. In this season, they end up making tires. They end up, besides the tires, they don't actually, here, what else do they do? They make motorcycles, which is cool. Besides that, though, they after that point, they really focus in on like the war tactics and stuff, so there isn't really as much, they're not really making any more science stuff, I think, beyond that point, if I'm not mistaken. They do end up, like, you have Senku basically telling, like, the people at Quartz City, okay, you're going to make artificial diamonds and stuff, so that is also happening in the background, and they are ultimately trying to form a diamond of their, like, make a new battery for the Medusa. So overall, I would say that the science stuff is, and then you also have Suika doing her, like, her own solo arc where she ends up having to make nitric acid on her own. All of it, I would give probably, I'll go an 8 out of 10. It's great, but it is definitely, like, it feels a bit more minimal this season compared to some other seasons, because this season it's like, yep, so certain seasons it's more action oriented, and then certain seasons are more science oriented, and at this point in the show you're kind of like, the more time goes by, it does feel like it gets a bit more, I don't know, usually the first half of the seasons are more science oriented, and then in the second half usually, like for when they face Ibarra, in this case when they're facing Stanley, like these points, they kind of feel a bit more action oriented than science oriented, which is fine, because the next category is the action stuff, and this, Jesus Christ, this season has, like, out of all the action, this one definitely the most brutal. This is definitely the most brutal season up until this point, or at least part of the season up until this point. We've seen so many deaths, like so much people just get gunned down and stuff. So yeah, Tsukasa just gets completely gunned down. There was like some, also, even so, there was like some cool action sequence. There was like one in particular with Maz that I really liked. Like Maz, when he basically finds out that he can start fighting, he ends up just really starting to go off, and I thought that was great. So I did like the action sequences that there were, and yeah, just a lot of stuff that I was not expecting. Really brutal stuff. Just once again, a lot of characters getting gunned down. Taiju just taking a whole grenade to the face. Just really brutal stuff. And overall, I would give it definitely, I would go, the action and the war taxes, once again, they get into like some military theory in this season, which I thought was interesting. I would give the action a solid 8 out of 10, I would say. It is definitely, it feels a bit like there isn't as much combat stuff. Like, you do have some combat stuff. You have Maya versus Tsukasa, which I thought was great. Like, all the hand-to-hand combat stuff is cool. But when it's just like characters fighting against people with guns, it does feel a bit one-sided, which is very well shown, where you do have a lot of the characters in the season just getting completely just one-sidedly massacred. So yeah, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. I thought it was great, but I did kind of hope for, well, just like I liked what they did, but I do just like the hand-to-hand stuff more so, which they had less of this season, it felt like. So in terms of the worst thing is just, once again, the whole method of the I don't know, I feel like there should be some easier ways that they could have planned out the whole revival fluid thing. It just felt like there should have been an easier way than just waiting for the flask to break after a certain amount of time to go by. So yeah, and besides that, I will say, I mean, it felt a bit unbelievable that like Suika, even after 7 years, was able to come up with like a method in order to make nitric acid. I guess she did have the instructions from Senku, but initially she said like she didn't really, she knew how to read, but she didn't really understand it. So I'm wondering, like, okay, what happened in that time that all of a sudden she was able to understand those instructions of how to make the nitric acid? So that, I guess, is, I don't know, I guess trial and error, but those like aspects, those just like, just some stuff that it's like, I feel like, okay, is this really like, but how plausible is this that like this is the best course of action? That kind of stuff. I would say I'll give it like a, I don't know, 5 out of 10. I'll say a 5 out of 10 because it doesn't really ruin anything. So like it just makes me like question it a bit, but it's really not honestly making my thoughts about the season any more negative. So in terms of the best thing, I will say probably just the ending, honestly. Like the whole final, when it gets to the point where it's like, okay, we need to free here. I'll tell you when the shifting point was. Like, first of all, I like the first half of the season. Let's get that out of the way. But then this is the first time I saw the second half of the season, and so once you get to the point of like Tetsukasa, Kohaku, and Hyoga, once they died, it was like, oh shit, this is getting real serious. And then they end up like, okay, we have to petrify the entire world, and then just, I'll say like the entire second half is like, I don't even know, I don't have a best thing in mind, to be honest, because I also really like the first half of the season, so it's very difficult. but yeah, all the characters dying, that was like really just unexpected, and then the whole petrification of the world, and then Suika coming back on her own, and then the whole time skip that happens, and then everyone getting revived at the end, and then just so much good stuff, I would say, and I honestly can't think of anything in particular, so I'll just reuse the best score, which is the characters 9 out of 10, so I guess that is a fitting finals. That's a fitting best score. I guess the characters are really good, and yeah, I guess all the stuff that I do like about this season is based on the actions of the characters and stuff, so yeah, that is all the scores, so I'm going to do the calculations. So King Crimson. Alright, so it ends up coming out to about, not about exactly an 8 out of 10, great, but I would give it higher than that. I think I would give this, honestly, between an 8.5 to a 9. This was between amazing and incredible, and I'll be generous. I'll give it a 9 out of 10. I thought that this season was incredible, and yeah, honestly, I didn't really know. I saw the first half, and I was like, okay, I like the first half, and I was wondering, like, okay, what was the second half going to be, because this was the only part of the show up until this point that I haven't seen, and honestly, it did not. It did the opposite of disappoint. It shocked me with how good it ended up being. So, like, I was expecting it for it to be good, but to the scale of this magnitude, I was just pleasantly surprised. So, definitely, I would say a 9 out of 10. Incredible, and I am very excited to see what this show has in store in the future going forward. So, yeah, but that is pretty much all there is to it. So if you have any recommendations, any shows, movies, video game stories, anime, manga, web series, anything that you want me to review, leave it in the comments and I will maybe possibly check it out. But with that said, that is pretty much all there is to it. So let's leave it at that.